Lots to talk to Mel Stride, Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, about then this morning. Good morning, good morning. It's great to see you. Thanks. Are you a bit of a mover on the dance floor?
You don't want to see me on the dance floor, actually. My young daughters would concur with that.
OK. Yes. Talk to me about what is going on with the French. Are we nearing a deal with them?
Well, clearly the Prime Minister has been engaged with President Macron, and the government's been engaged with the French government at all sorts of different levels. And my understanding is we're in the final stages of what could be an agreement, which would be very good news. And I know that the Prime Minister personally has been absolutely on top of this, a couple of briefings a day, in fact, on the whole crisis that we're looking at. So let's keep our fingers crossed. The mood music seems to be good at the moment.
And would that involve British border force being posted with the French?
We'll have to wait and see. We'll have to wait and see on what any detail that emerges. But I think the good thing is, I think there has been a fundamental shift in tone between ourselves and the French. And of course, that's fundamental to any deal. I just think the approach of Rishi Sunak has been one of close engagement. I think he's a person that gets right across all the details. So I suspect, having put a lot of personal time into what the solutions might look like, he's probably come up with something that might stand more chance of working than might otherwise be the case. So hopefully I would think the French would see him as somebody very serious, somebody who wants to work as a close partner in solving a problem which, of course, is not good for either country.
How close are we to a deal?
I'm not actually in the room myself, so I can't comment. But certainly what is being said is that we appear to be in the final stages, is the language that I've heard of a potential deal.
Weeks, days, months?
Let's wait and see. Let's wait and see. But I've no doubt that the government is pressing on this with great vigour.
Sir Braverman, the Home Secretary, has her own view on migrants that she's told us quite a lot about. Yesterday, we had the former Home Secretary Grant Shapps on the programme. He appeared to throw her under the bus, suggesting that the government was in danger of breaking the law, and he changed the situation at Manston, the detention centre, straight away, the first moment he got into power. Why did she not do it?
Well, I don't know all the ins and outs of exactly the decisions that Suella made, but I do know that the Prime Minister has confidence in her. She's made some mistakes in the past. She's apologised for that. The priority now is really to look forward. And if you look at what has happened in recent times, things have improved. So we've gone down from 4,000 migrants at the Manston Centre, which is massively over the capacity, down to 1,600, which is at the capacity. So progress is being made. But I don't think anybody would suggest there isn't still quite a long way to go.
No, I understand that. But just to take you back to the point that I was trying to make, I mean, the government can't have been in danger of breaking the law one day and the previous day not.
Well, as I say, I don't know all the intricacies of all the decisions that were taken at that time. But you acknowledge that? Certainly Sir Braverman, I believe, is stating very clearly that she didn't do anything that would have been in breach of the law. But as I say, what I think really matters now is that we get on top of the situation at Manston. Robert Jenrick and the Home Secretary have been very closely involved now in steadying that situation. And it seems to me that in fairly short order, after what was a huge surge of migrants coming across the Dover Straits, they have actually started to get on top of that. And I think that's the most important thing at the moment. Now, there's a lot more work to do, as we know, working with our French partners and other approaches to solving what is a multifaceted issue with migration, but it is an absolute top priority, and I've no doubt that through time we will start to see improvements.
Do you acknowledge that it would be a surprise for the advice from officials to have changed within 24 hours?
Well, as I say, I'm not close enough to know what the advice may or may not have been and what the circumstances on the ground were, so I can't really comment on that, other than to say that I think the most important thing now is that we continue to make the kind of progress that we've seen in the last week.
What sort of man is Gavin Williamson?
I think he's somebody who has some significant strengths. I think he understands government very closely. He was PPS to David Cameron when he was Prime Minister, so he's somebody who would have an understanding of the workings of the parliamentary party and of Parliament, and know a large number of colleagues. So I think those are strengths that Gavin has.
He doesn't seem a particularly pleasant bloke or boss.
Well, I actually served in the Whip's office under Gavin Williamson, and there was always this great aura of, do you remember Cronus, the spider, the tarantula, etc.? Mm-hmm. And the reality with Cronus is he was much touted, but he never actually was released to bite anybody. So that was how I always saw Gavin, as somebody who had this sort of aura or mystique around him. But the reality was he just generally got on with his job. And I can only speak from my own experience, Kay, and that was how I found him working for him for over a year.
Well, we've seen some of the messages that he sends to women, haven't we? And we've also suggestions that he vehemently denies, that he tells somebody to slit their throat and somebody else to jump out of a window.
Well, if that is the case, that is utterly, utterly unacceptable. But at the moment, it is in the realm of media speculation. There is an independent inquiry, as you know, going on around another incident, alleged incident between himself and the then Chief Whip, Wendy Morton. And I think the important thing we do now is not to start intervening as government minister and opining on who's right and wrong and what may or may not have happened, but to wait for the results of that investigation. And then when we have that, and any other investigation that may be triggered in the meantime, then I think we can take stock and come to firm conclusions.
Who's going to carry out that investigation?
Well, the independent parliamentary authorities. So the complaint, as I understand it, was made by Wendy Morton about Sir Gavin Williamson.
We've seen the text.
Yes, at that point it was a party matter because it was made to Conservative Party central office, and so it will go through that process. But it will be independent and it will be thorough, and it will come to a firm conclusion, I have no doubt.
And the suggestion was that the Prime Minister knew about it at the time and yet still gave him a job.
Well, I understand what he knew was that there had been a disagreement between Wendy Morton and Gavin Williamson, but what he didn't know was the substance of the allegation. In other words, he hadn't at that point, for example, seen the texts that are now out in the public.
I'm not surprised that he wouldn't have asked to see that. I mean, if it had been me, I'd have asked to see.
Well, it depends. I think if somebody came to you and said, look, just to let you know, Prime Minister, these two individuals have had a disagreement and it's all got rather heated, etc., amidst the whirl of a busy day and lots of appointments and other things going on, you might be forgiven for not necessarily drilling down and demanding all the detail immediately.
What do you think of the content?
And particularly if at that point it was, as I believe it was, subject to an independent investigation, that would perhaps be further reason why you wouldn't actually say, I want to see all the evidence.
Sure. What did you make of the content of those WhatsApp messages?
Well, unacceptable. Unacceptable. I mean, to adopt that kind of language and that kind of tone is clearly not acceptable. And to be fair to Gavin, he has apologised and recognised that whilst he may have been frustrated at the time, it was inappropriate to respond.
Though, wasn't it? It wasn't just one particular, when he was hot under the collar.
Well, as I say, he has accepted that it was not the right way to proceed. And I've just answered your question very directly by saying I don't think it was appropriate.
Yeah. Is he unsackable?
Well, I don't think anybody's unsackable. I'm not unsackable. As we've seen in the recent past, even Prime Ministers are not unsackable. So I think the answer to that is we are all sackable at some point, depending on the circumstances.
I mean, you're doing really badly in the polls, though, aren't you? Down again in the latest poll, a 20-odd point difference between you and Labour. It doesn't help when you have people like Gavin Williamson in government, does it really?
Well, we've seen actually an improvement of our position in the poll. Now, admittedly, from a very, very...
48%, 27%.
Low, yes, from a very low base. I was just going to make that point. But it is nonetheless beginning to go in the right direction. And there are several things that we've got to get right. And one of them is migration. There are very serious issues around the health service that Steve Barclay is working on and beginning to address. And, of course, there's a central issue of the economy. And we'll hear from the Chancellor on the 17th of November the fiscal plan, if you like, and the OBR forecast around that to settle things down and give us that direction of travel on the economy. And my feeling is that as we start to make progress in that area, those areas, we will start to see further progress against Labour and get ourselves back into political contention. But I do accept that we have a very long way to go and there's an awful lot of work to be done.
I think that was your opportunity to mention why you're here as well this morning, Minister.
Well, yes, some good news, Kay, because I mentioned the Chancellor's work. Now, of course, that's going to be very tough choices around tax and spending and lots of difficult things that the government's going to have to do. But within that, the government's core mission is to look after the vulnerable, to make sure that those that are less well off are as protected as possible from the fallout from the war in Ukraine and the spike in energy prices and so on. And so that means we're making in total a £650 payment to low-income households. That's 8 million households up and down the country. And the second tranche of that is literally going out between today and the end of this month.
Drop in the bucket, though, isn't it?
It will be of huge help to millions of people, and it is not the only thing that we're doing. Of course, it's part of a much wider support package. So there's a £400 discount
which
off
we know about, yeah.
Energy bills.
Sure.
So there's targeted support for the vulnerable, £150 for those who are disabled, £300 for pensioners. There's also the energy price guarantee. So we're making sure that average energy bills don't exceed £2,500. There's a local authority fund for discretionary support.
Boris Johnson,
so it's important, though. This is a huge package.
Let's talk about Boris Johnson. He's at COP. Is that a help or a hindrance?
Well, Boris is perfectly entitled to go to COP, as with many Conservatives.
He's just mischief-making.
He cares. I don't see it that way. I think at the end of the day, he was a Prime Minister who believed very strongly in the green agenda, in net zero, and was incredibly enthusiastic about the potential that the economy has for benefiting from the green technologies of the future. So it doesn't surprise me that he's there. And I don't see why he shouldn't be.
Well, he created a U-turn, didn't he, for our own Prime Minister, who said he wasn't going to go, and now he said he wanted to concentrate on the economy. Now he's decided he will go after all. When I interviewed Rishi Sunak in the summer, he told me that his first overseas trip would be to Ukraine. It's not. So what does that say to the people of Ukraine?
Well, sometimes I think too much can be set by exactly who talks to who first, or who visits which country first. One always has to get a balance between, what you would ideally like to do and what circumstances dictate. I think it was very important that he went to Sharm el-Sheikh, and he clearly did as well, because despite all the pressures that he's under working with the Chancellor for the statement on the 17th, he has gone. He has made a major impact there. He has underscored our commitment to net zero, to delivering on the Glasgow COP and the commitments that we made then. I think it was important that he did so, and I think probably personally to him, it was important that he went too.
He's going to Ukraine, though, isn't he?
Well, let's see. These tend not to be things...
The AMBO told us yesterday that he was.
Well, then it must be true. Let's see about that. I mean, visits tend to be, because of the security that surrounds them. So you're not going to tell us. That's fair enough. That's fair enough. Talking about security, what about these Stop Oil protesters? What are we going to do about them? Well, I do think there's a major issue when individuals can go onto motorways, or even just outside Parliament, in fact, periodically, at will, just sit down in the middle of the road and disrupt the traffic. Sometimes, indeed, emergency services get caught up in that as well. So the government is moving to the point where we're having the tools to be able to deal with that through legislation. And it will then be a case of government working with the police and within the legal framework so that we're able to intervene in a more robust manner to make sure that these kind of things are less destructive than they are at the moment.
Have they got a point, though? They have got a point, haven't they?
Well, they do in the sense, and I think a couple of points here, Kay. I think one is absolutely, we are all determined, and this government, above all else, is absolutely determined to bear down on the use of fossil fuels. And you can see that in the diminished use of coal, for example, the way that we have ramped up renewables, not least offshore wind. We've made huge progress as a government, and we've got to keep that going. Second point I would make is that we do have to strike the right balance between the right of individuals to express their opinion and protest, which is absolutely fundamental to a civilised democracy, which is what we have in our country, and at the other time making sure that we don't inconvenience the public or indeed endanger the public in some circumstances. And that's the kind of balanced approach that the government is taking to strike the right balance between those particular objectives.
Are you a football fan?
I'm not hugely into football. My wife supports Liverpool.
Oh, so she isn't.
So if Liverpool are playing, I do show an interest in Liverpool, but I can't say I have a local team that I support.
What do we think about the situation in Qatar? We've had several guests on over the last couple of days saying that, we really shouldn't be playing there, and it's totally inappropriate the way that people who are gay are treated in a place like Qatar. Whereas James Cleverly has said, the Foreign Secretary, that we should respect the rules of the country that we're going to. Well,
I think you can work with the rules of the country that you go to, because that is their law. But you don't have to approve. And I know that demonstrations have been made by the UK government to the Qatar authorities around the issues that you're mentioning, because from my point of view and the government's point of view, those things are wrong. On the issue of sport and politics, I personally tend to lean into believing that we should have the sport and deal with the politics separately. And I would apply that also to the Olympic Games and boycotts and so on. But, you know, these are serious issues, and they are issues that the government is and has been taking up.
Final question before I let you go. A couple of weeks ago, last Friday, I was speaking to Anne-Marie Trevelyan outside Downing Street, and I said, do you think Liz Truss will still be in power by the time I came back from my holidays? She didn't even last the day. Do you think Gavin Williamson will still be in government by Christmas?
Well, I'm not going to speculate on anybody's future. I suspect the answer to that is yes, because there is an investigation that will take some time, and we've got to wait to see what comes out of that. The Prime Minister has made it clear that he's an important member of his cabinet. We discussed earlier some of the strengths that he has as an individual, and the important thing now is that the cabinet, which is broadly drawn from right across the parliamentary party, works together. Closely together, drawing on all the talents we have, and Gavin most definitely has a number of talents in order to do the very best that we can for the British people.
He's going nowhere soon,
at a difficult time.
Yeah, I must let you go. It's always great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thank you.